I smacked right in the middle, of the bridge, and then went in. I couldn't get my prosthetic out, so my prosthetic was pinning my good leg. But I didn't panic because I was a swimmer before that. It's like, well, the water's not warm,
right?
But the worst thing you want to do, Jim, is to panic. So I kind of took like 5 seconds. Okay, you're underwater. Hey, the boat floats. So you've got a buoyancy aid, really. Right. All you got to do is get up and then lean on the side of it, and there's going to be a safety line. And first person I rang with my mom, I was like, I capsized, and I nearly drowned. And then when I put the phone down, like, holy shit, that's the serious of it. It was quite.
Yeah, that's when you realize, wow, that could have been bad.
It could have been bad, but you could say it worked out.
You just heard this pivotal moment where James Roberts is trapped underwater, and if he loses his cool, he's going to drown. James was training to compete in the Paralympic Games during this moment where he crashed his boat into a bridge. And I am so excited to bring this episode of Unbeatable to you right in the middle of the Winter Olympics when everybody in the world is watching their favorite competitors. And you get a chance to hear today from a guy who's competed in not one, but 2 Paralympic Games on this episode of Unbeatable.
These stories of triumph over adversity will help you handle your toughest days in life. You're listening to Unbeatable with Jeff Struker.
Hey, James, thank you for joining me for this episode of Unbeatable. I am super excited to talk to you about competing in the Paralympic Games. We're even going to talk about the Winter Olympics that are going on right now. But I want to get to know you a little bit. So why don't you describe this unusual childhood you had growing up with a U.S. military father and a British mother on a NATO base in Brussels, Belgium?
I've got probably a weird multicultural upbringing. I look at things I look at things very differently from maybe an open perspective, as I had to be able to speak to kids. Well, I spoke a foreign language probably from the age of 3 years old. So,
wow,
speaking to people in English or French, or I had Spanish in high school as well, it comes second nature to me in terms of I like to learn other languages. I know the culture. So, for me, it's weird because it's a bubble in itself, because it's a multicultural community in another country. So it's quite surreal. I think the only thing I can compare it to is probably a Paralympics or Olympics, because it's got that kind of feel of obviously it's got arm guards and there's barbed wire all the way around it, and there's more than one nationality. So I think for me, obviously the Paralympics is almost like coming. I think for London, probably like coming home, because well, I've spent 18 years like this. This is normal.
Well, I've never been over to Brussels, Belgium, to the Supreme Allied headquarters, which is now now the NATO headquarters. But I've known a number of people that have been stationed there, and they all came back saying the same thing that you're saying. They loved the place because of how many countries and their cultures came with them, all working together in the same place at the same time. And I can imagine for you, with parents from 2 different nationalities living in a different country than those 2 parents come from, you got exposed to all kinds of culture literally every day growing up.
Well, I think you get used to it. I think I was the earliest memory that, family remind me of is speaking to one of the Italian MPs, going ciao bambino.
Yeah, nice.
So it's so. For me, it's nothing abnormal, to want to at least learn at least a few phrases from a language. Went out to China for my first Paralympics. I learned a few phrases. It bit me in the ass a little bit, because it's like, why didn't you learn a bit more? It's like, well, I've learned hello. Yeah. How you doing? Thank you. That's more than
good,
most
right?
people.
I'm good, right?
I've made an effort to. Well, Chinese is not like any other language. It's
not easy.
So it's not easy. I've made an attempt. One of my teammates, he did obviously learn Mandarin. So, but he wanted to do that for me.
Off, right?
I did. Well, you could say the bare minimum, but I went to at least that I can communicate in your own language. If I got a little bit too technical, which can happen in some languages, I go, I've learned a bit too much and now I'm out of my depth.
Well, you obviously have a different accent than I do with the same language, the English language, though most people from the UK would say what's spoken in America and American English is not the English language. But why did you decide to settle down because you've been exposed to so many cultures and parents come from different countries. Why did you decide to settle down in Wales?
It suits my personality where I reside now. It's a very quaint. It's actually the town my mother grew up in.
Oh,
where I live.
Look at that!
So I spent a lot of my childhood holidays and vacations here. So be it summer vacations, Christmas, up until I was a teenager, where I would be a bit more rebellious, and my aunt lived in Manchester, in a big city. So I was like, no, I don't want to go to the seaside resort no more. I want to go to the big smoke. But it suits me to the T because it's very, very, very quaint, very laid back. 6 months of the year. Obviously, summertime, it's like any holiday resort. It's full of tourists, so it's not pleasant. But yeah. It feels like home now. Maybe a couple of years ago it didn't, because I didn't know where I fitted in terms of, well, Belgium is home, but those are the people. The people are no longer there. They've moved on. The families have gone back to where they've come from. They might have emigrated. It's like, well, the things that I'm missing, the people, the play. I've been back 4 or 5 years ago. And I was like, oh, it's changed. Yeah. And then my mom was like, well, it was like that when you were growing up. It's just, you've got rose tinted glasses to some extent. You're seeing what you want to see. And when I got older, it's like, well, this place isn't that great, but obviously the people went there, and all things like that. And I think I've come to embrace here because it's not far from the mountains. It's the beach is within walking distance. I probably have, well, especially during the pandemic, a lot of people in the city probably be envious of, just being able to walk out and you be in nature. I'm very, very much fortunate to do that. And it's nice to be able to go, if I wanted to, 45-minute drive, go into the countryside and be in what is the second biggest mountain in the UK, or if I wanted to, take a walk down to the beach. And I didn't have that growing up. Being in smack bang in the middle of Belgium, it's an hour away, and that was the bonus of it. I've tried with the base team of competing. I could be in the Netherlands one week, Germany the next. I probably took that for granted, whereas now it's like, okay, you've got the best of both worlds that people would probably, I don't want to say die for, but in terms of, they would probably love to bite my hand off to have. And it's nice to be in what is familiar surroundings. It's I've grown up here. Okay, I've not grown up around with the people of my same age, but I've got a different outlook of my family left the area and we come back. So the only people that can relate to that is obviously people that military brats. It's like, it's normal.
Oh yeah,
spent
of course
2-3 years here, and then maybe come back to the US, or in my case back to the UK to go to do their collegiate days. And then obviously you can still talk about the heydays. I'm lucky that I'm not that far away. They miss it, and for me, residing and answering your question, I think, why did I pick the UK over Belgium or the US? Is come back to sport. It was all my decisions 15 years ago, maybe a little bit longer. we're around about, so we're talking about swimming. So where is the best school I can go to that's got one of our academies? So I went to Swansea University, which happened to be one of them. The other one would have been Manchester or Stirling. I didn't want to. I chose not to go to Manchester because the school that I wanted to do and do sports science was an hour drive away from the actual performance center. It's like, well, that doesn't make, doing that every day, twice a day, that makes no sense whatsoever. So let's take that off the board. You and I discussed it before we started talking. Scotland, too cold.
Yes.
That was the end of discussion. So I'm left with probably one choice. And it ended up, I had to do an interview to get in to the school. I bombed it. I didn't do very well.
Did, for real?
I bombed it. I don't do very well in interview settings. Obviously, this is not the same thing.
You're doing pretty good right now. I'm just saying.
In terms of, you know, if it's like a job scenario, I struggle to be able to sell, as in why should I come to your institution or why should I get the job? I make it probably a bigger deal than it needs to be. Originally, it was supposed to be the strength and conditioning coach for the swimming program, and he was the mediator person. He was doing that. He got called away for a conference. That conversation would be completely different because it would be natural. People, James, why do you want to do it? And I worked with him in the summer before I went to the school, so I already know you, so the conversation is a lot easier. So they gave me a conditional offer, but at we call it a foundation degree, so like a JUCO college. I was like, well, I want to obviously go to the school. I'm going to have to take it, and went down that route because all the other options weren't viable. It's like, well, if I want to progress in sport, I'm going to have to take this decision and obviously make the best of a bad situation and see where you go. And I've discussed this with family in the present, and they kind of go, well, why did you make that decision? Well, I made it because that was the only option. And why did I bomb the interview? That would probably be looking at something that well, that's why people prepare themselves for interviews and practice. So you can kind of prepare yourself for at least some of the questioning you're going to get. That scenario probably wouldn't bother me at all now, because it's like, well, this is why I think. And when I went to do my postgraduate, it was easy because it's like all the dice is in my hand. You need to sell to me why I should come to your institution. So it was a lot easier to be on the other side of the fence. So I did the 2 years, did okay academically. It probably worked out better to having done those 2 years in junior college. And then I went to the head of the school to kind of beg to, well, if there's a place going, would I be able to get one? So I think because I had the balls to do it I've done it numerous occasions where in academia, I've gone above and beyond where people probably think, well, you just accept the decision. You're not going to go further than junior college. I got in. It's not done the institution any bad because I went on to become a 2-time Paralympian. So it's not hurt their legacy, or their marketing department probably does quite well off it. But he said, well, if there is space, we'll let you in. And I think I got in, and it probably been a blessing in disguise. Most of the work I'd already seen, so it's like regurgitating old content. And it being my first year in university and going for a Paralympics, when I had to move up to go full time, it wasn't too big a task for me because the university were on board. Sport Wales on board, Disability Sport Wales on board. It's like, well, we believe in you, James. I didn't believe myself, and people probably felt hard to believe. It's like, I don't think I can. I don't know if I'm going to make the Paralympics, but they were willing to allow me to miss all my lectures from the Easter time to the end of the year. I only had to come back for a group assignment that had to be done in person and my exams, and that was it. And everything else was remote learning, which for the American audience is normal, but for British things, until the pandemic, they didn't know what it was. Yeah. So I was very, very grateful. So I anytime I wasn't training, I was in my books. Yeah. It's like, well, I owe them massively for
taking a risk on you, right?
For taking a risk. That's a massive risk for all the marbles, and there's no guarantee. So I think subconsciously I've always used that in my career as I owe it to myself, I owe it to my family, I owe it to these institutions that are pumping money into me at the end of the day. Yeah. And there's no guarantee that that person's going to fulfill their potential. So I think once I made the games, and my ex-coach from swimming, and we bumped into each other in the village, it's like you finally realize your potential you had in swimming. I'd kind of, that was, for me, that was like a light bulb moment. It's like, okay, now I know I belong. Yeah, right. I belong. So the games itself were not too bad.
Yeah.
The final I competed in, I've never been so relaxed.
Well, let's talk about the transition. You had swam for many years, and then you transitioned from swimming to rowing. Why?
Yeah. I got dropped. So if we rewind
somebody
back,
helped you transition.
Yeah. So if we rewind back to my first year of junior college, so that's what I've set my life on in terms of this is where I'm going to start my sporting career. I was dropped that Christmas.
Oh my goodness, man. That must have been brutal.
I saw the writing on the wall because it nearly happened the year before. But when you I spent all summer there trying to qualify. We got a Commonwealth Games, so be it like the Pan Am Games, which will be this year, 2000. Yeah, I was preparing for the one in 2006. So I went over after finishing high school, spent a summer where I'm going to go to study. That didn't work out because I was homesick. I pretty much I swam slower than before I went. But once I was put back into familiar surroundings, massively fast.
Yeah, boom.
So it worked, but obviously didn't work for what it needed to. And obviously, we fast forward to the Christmas. I didn't make obviously the standard that was set, and I wasn't distraught. I was deflated because like, well, what do this is my life, or this? Yeah,
everything had been building towards this moment, right?
So, unbeknownst to me, behind the scenes, my mom was speaking to our performance director, but it's more like an uncle to me than a performance director. So if he'd have known about that long before the I'll call it a charade, but I didn't respond well to, if you say this is your last opportunity to make the time, I don't respond. But I do now because ultimately I use it as fuel. But then it was just extra pressure. Yeah. It's like, well, I know I need to hit this standard. I'm under the car. I'm under the pump as it is. Just making it 10 times worse. So for me, what was it like? I always talk about it in terms of, I was thinking to come back in the January. I'm going to be a regular student. I'm going to get to see what college is actually like. But I got a phone call. It's like the day before we were going to break up, from the performance director. James, what's your thoughts about doing rowing? It's like, I don't know what to think about it, because the only thing that I've seen is the Olympic Games or the boat, or actually Cambridge boat race. So I've got nothing to go on. Can I run it past my mom, who I'm very close with? And obviously I had a chat with her, and she doesn't remember her saying this, but this is my recollection of it. You could be very, very good or absolutely useless. I made this into a TEDx talk.
That's awesome. I'm going to write that down. You could be very good or absolutely useless.
But from a sport perspective, it's a double positive, because it's like, well, if I'm good with it, hey, wonderful, I'll run with it. If I'm useless, I'll go do something else.
That's right. Go do something else. Yeah. The worst would be a little bit okay at it, and you just start giving yourself to something you're a little bit okay at. Maybe it's better positioned to be either absolutely great or just terrible at it. That way, it's time for me to move on.
Well, I from that, I was like, well, let's take a punt at it and see where I'm better than I thought I would be.
Wait a second. You just used punt as a term to refer to this, like punting on the Tim's kind of punt, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I felt like I needed to point that out.
And I went to the first training session in Cardiff, and it's like a rowing boat, but it's on land, and there's no actual water. And I was kind of described how to do the technique. Picked it up within probably half an hour. And they're like, "What about going on the water now?" I wasn't expecting this.
Yeah.
I'm willing to try it, see if we're good or we're not. Self-doubt creeping in. Yeah. Other than the fact that I spent 8 years in water, so it shouldn't have bothered me being on top of it, other than the water outside is a lot colder if you went in. And I was like Dr. Water. It was like I'd always been in this sport and just excelled. And I think we alluded to this before we started going, is because all the resources were thrown behind me of Rowan was going to be making his Paralympic debut. Let's throw everything at James's feet and see how he goes with it. So I had
a huge support system.
So I had loads of coaches. I had, you name it. It's not that they wanted to come along for the ride. It's like, well, we like what you're doing. James happens to be the vehicle. Let's give him the support. I think the governing body in GB didn't like that because they didn't discover me. And I probably had to face that. This is a reflection now in the future. If I was probably trying to fight the establishment, it's like, well, you haven't discovered me, but I'm a raw talent. And I seem to be able to, well, I was never beaten individually. So that speaks volumes.
Yeah.
So, all the testing we did on land, I just tried to stick in as close as I could to the front as well. The rowing's got a saying of the ergos don't float, so the rowing machine doesn't float. If it's close, they're going to look back on it. But every decision finally is going to be based on what happens on the water.
Yeah.
So I went in with a mindset of, well, if you're in the top 3 on land, I back myself to win on the water 100% of the time. And there came a time in, which season would have been? The 2007 season. So my second year in the program. They decided not to pick the team, even though it was supposed to be on paper, the final selection. I had like a Kobe moment or a Jordan moment. I got inside I was raging. I was like, well, if a final decision is a final decision. So I took it upon myself I'm going to humiliate this other person. I'm going to make a statement. I ended up beating the person by 30 seconds. And they said, oh, we're not going to pick the team. It's like, there's no coming back from this.
Yeah.
You're not going to find 30 seconds in a month.
That's right.
So what was probably more embarrassing was we had to restart the race because he fell in. It's like, well, if that happens in a real life scenario, that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
It's tough luck. That happened. You fell in. That's your own fault. I got a better start on the second time around, and then obviously kept going.
Yeah.
And my performance coach, this is an inside joke between him and my family. It's like, which James is going to turn up normally. obviously that one was very ruthless. It might happen like 2-3 times in my entire career that I was like intent to, okay, I'm not happy with the decision. I'm going to make a statement. And then obviously that should speak volumes of, well, okay, this person isn't good enough. So we did the final trial 30 days later. I had to train with him, and the combination would never would never compete. Right. Like, well, in hindsight, it was a lost opportunity because it could have been like a weight session because he was heavy. He was about, how heavy would have been? About 200-pound plus. And I only weigh about 150. It could have been a strength and conditioning exercise for me, pulling around the lake. But I was inside, I was like, well, this is just a stupid exercise. It's pointless for him because I'm not going to do much. And it's a pointless exercise for me because ultimately I'm not going to get anything out of it. And I might as well stayed at home and trained at home because I would have trained properly. I think in hindsight, if I'd have probably taken the former mindset of, well, let's pull him around. As long as I don't get hurt, I gain something and I actually get a bit stronger. You can
get stronger, right?
And then we had the final trial. Weather was horrific. But I trained in where my training base was. Got water taxis, got boats going up and down the river. It's not bad as the Thames, but so you're going to get wash and it's going to be bumpy. He wasn't used to it. I was like, don't matter if it's, I'm all I got to do is get in front and that's it. It's game over. I'm not going to humiliate you again because you know I'm better than you. He'd come from a rugby background because we're very respectful. So I was like, well, I'm not going to humiliate you again. It's not your fault. The establishment is what it is. I'll just beat you. And then obviously beat him. And then went to that games, qualified for the boat for the games. This is where the sport is very unique. I can't think of any other sport that the people that qualify the boat don't get guaranteed a place.
Really?
And it's the same in the Paralympic or Olympics. There's no guarantee that you'll go the following year. And I was asked on a radio interview at that World Champs, and this was live. What would happen, James, if you weren't selected? I went to me and the media team that we had. It was supposed to be recorded.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, I could think if it was recorded, I could think on my feet and then give a response, and then it's not a soundbite. And then when he said it was live, I was like, well, I can't take my time to answer this because it's live, and I can't give an answer that I'll regret.
Right.
And I think I went down the diplomatic approach. It's like, well, I'll do my best to obviously make sure I don't lose. And then obviously when I come off the phone, I said to the media team, this is what they asked me, and it was live. So they were fuming. But I think it's helped me for my career to expect the unexpected because the media being the media, that I won't say that's the sole intent, but that's what they like to do. They like to get little sound bites and then say, well, James said this.
Catch you off guard, right?
And then catch you off guard. It's like, well, I can't control anybody else as much as I'd like to, or as much as I would always think that would be the case. If somebody's better than me, I can't do anything about it. Right. I can only do my best to be better than them. Okay, that season, I beat the other person individually, but that season they decided to run the double as a trial, and I didn't show up, like physically. I didn't row worse than that the season before or after. People were like shocked. It's like, where's James gone? Technically, it's something I took from swimming. I took into rowing to be very, very good technically. That went out the window. It was like this person never been in a boat, so they couldn't believe. It's like, what's happened? But they were gonna pick that day. That was gonna be the axe. You fall on your sword, James. And they were gonna pick the other person. It's like, because I had a good support network behind me, it's like, well, hang on a second. That didn't happen in 07. That didn't happen in 06 when it was the roles were reversed. So they gave me that ultimatum. As I said, I've got to move up there tomorrow. Me being very naive I would have been 21. yeah, let's do it. And people are like, no, James, can we have 5 minutes with James alone and make him make a rational decision? I'm making a very rational, because I was going to let sports supersede, and I was going to throw away university. I was going to throw pretty much my life in terms of just for, well, it's a dream really, but there's no guarantee that would materialize. So they went, come on, let's think rationally. We know I was doing it probably on raw emotion because I was probably distraught of, well, I've lost my opportunity of going to the pinnacle of disabled sport. What do I do now? Let's do it. But within a space of, I think it was 2-3 weeks in the end. It took longer than I wanted it to take to be able to make the move, to get all the logistics and the financial stuff behind me, so I could obviously they would support me while I was down there. And then once I was there and they could see me day in, day out, it's like, yeah, James does care. He's got quite a laissez-faire attitude. I still do now. But being able to see me day in, day out and kind of showcase, well, I'm going to throw blood, sweat, and tears to this goal because I want it, then they could kind of see, oh, yeah, it does. And obviously then made the Paralympics. And it was a bit surreal because it's like the first one is, I'm here. And when I got the selection letter, and this was 100 days out, my teammate said, oh, you're not excited? Like, no. My family's quite pessimistic.
Wait,
so
you've just been selected for the Paralympics, and your teammates are saying, aren't you excited? And your answer is no?
I wasn't, because I was pessimistic, because it's like anything could go wrong from now until then.
Yeah.
You could say pessimistic, critical, realist. It's like, obviously I don't want that to happen, but this is also a chance to get better. I'm not going to rest on my laurels. Yes, it's wonderful that I'm selected, but nobody else in the world is stopping. So I probably was very wise beyond my ears to some extent to kind of go, well, hey, this is all well and good, but yes, this could go wrong, but we still need to put in the work. Yeah. It's not finished. And those are probably the best part of my career. The rowing ones, there's aspects of it I don't like and I'm still angry about, but it's one of the sports. Some of the testing I wouldn't do again. I'd choose not to do lactate testing or VO2 max and things like that, but most of the things I would do over again because I enjoyed every aspect of it. I think more because of the seasonal aspect of rowing. You can see that swimming, you can't see the seasons. It's 20 degrees. Well, say it's nice and comfortable 365 days a year. Rowing is not pleasant in the autumn and the fall or the winter. It's brutal. It brings out the man out from the boys. But I loved it. It's like, I don't now, but I don't like to be out in the elements all the time, but I loved it. But I think because of having that momentum of success of, I'm quite naive from 1 minute, I'm a development athlete. Now, all of a sudden, now I need to be a performance athlete. It clicked. But I think because of, I think all the Welsh athletes are more of a family. You could ask somebody that's been to a games, well, what did you do? And he said, so you just copy behavior. It's like, well, they're doing this. This is my standard of what I need to do. And any ounce of, and I spoke to an athlete that I know from my podcast earlier, of the mindset, it breeds success. It's toxic, but it's very positive because everybody's going in the same, I'm not saying pulling the same, they're all going in the same direction in terms of what they want to achieve. So everybody wants to replicate it. So I've made it my task now. I've gone into coaching myself is, well, how do I dissect everything that I did for somebody that can, for a client to be able to utilize of that maybe they've not been nurtured in that way. They've not experienced failure and being able to use it to their advantage to turn into success. So for me, it's been utilizing, you know, interviews like this to kind of go backwards engineer it and go, well, this is what I did in this scenario. This is why it was successful. This is why I was advantageous. I'd probably thought I did it all myself. I know now, as a 35-year-old, that's not the case.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for my family willing to go above and beyond, if it's not for my university, Disability Sport Wales, funding me to go to my first Paralympics, I know I don't have this conversation today because things change.
James, your first Paralympics was China, is that right?
Yep.
Beijing?
Yep.
And 2008?
Yep.
And what event?
Feels so long. It feels such a long time ago now. There's another one there.
What event did you do? Event or events?
I did one event. So my classification had you could say it's a bad thing or a good thing. In every major championship I did with GB rowing, I went through every single round. And in rowing, that's not normal. So it's normally, depending on the amount of people that's in the event, you'd have a heat, a repechage, and a final. Or there was a semi-final and one of the world champs. Went through every single round.
Yeah.
Be the only boat in the team that did that.
Wow.
Everybody else, heat, final.
Hey, we're going to talk about London in 2012 in just a second, but right now the Winter Olympics are going on in Beijing. So does it bring up any memories for you?
I was watching the curling the other night.
Yeah, the curling.
On the BBC, they mentioned the swimming pool. I was like, its real name is the water cube.
Yeah, the cube, of course.
I was like, tick. I've gone to a winter game. I've been to a winter venue now. I've been to a winter Paralympic. I've been to a winter game.
That's right. Well, I was going to tell you, I am a huge Olympics fan. I have always been a huge fan of the Olympics. I can watch Olympic venues all day and all night long, and it doesn't even matter what the Olympics are. I just absolutely love them because of the athletes that have given every bit of their life to this one pinnacle moment. So, James, I didn't have a chance to warn you about this, but I got a little segment on this show that I call the high five. This is me like reaching across the Atlantic and doing a big high five with you. Yeah, thanks, man. And this one, I want to talk about what I love about watching the Olympics. Now, the Olympics came to Atlanta, Georgia, a long time ago. I was living in the area, and I went to the Olympic venues, but I never got a chance to watch an Olympic event live. So my time watching the Olympics has always been sitting on the sofa, and watching it from TV. But I'm watching the Winter Olympics right now, and I'm just in awe watching guys like Nathan Chen do double backflips in the air on the ice, and women like Chloe Kim doing crazy stunts in the air in the snowboard half pipe. I like everything about the Olympics. So what I wanted to do is just cover with you like my top 5 reasons why I love watching the Olympics, and I want you to throw in your thoughts on watching the Olympics. You've been a guy who's been able to be in more than one Paralympic Games, but you're watching it right now along with the rest of the world, right?
Absolutely.
So number 1, I think on my list of why I love watching the Olympic Games, winter or summer, is just because, everybody else in the world is watching this too, right? Like everybody wants to see their guy or their gal win. So the whole world is holding their breath in those finals, wanting to see their guy win, which makes the pressure enormous, but it also makes it a great, sporting event for the world to see. I think number 2 on my list, believe it or not, I am a swimmer at heart. I love swimming. So in the summer games, I can just watch every preliminary and all of the finals in swimming just because I'm so fascinated by swimmers and how talented of an athletes they are. But when it comes to watching the swimming in the Olympics, I totally nerd out watching the end, or the finals, because I'm trying to see who actually hit the wall first. It looks like there is like 1 millimeter of distance between two swimmers, and I don't know who hit the wall even after it's over with until they finally throw the.
You know the subtleties of it. If whoever hits the board harder,
that's what I mean.
It's not necessarily who finishes first; it's who hits the touchpad harder.
Yeah. So for an insider, tell everybody what it's like when you know you're neck and neck with the person in the lane next to you, and you're not sure who's going to actually hit that board first, or in your case, hit it harder, and you're trying to find out after the event's over with who actually just won that thing.
Well, I think this is more when I was a teenage swimmer. It was you need to either finish on the stroke and push through the board,
push all the way through, right?
Or you need to be willing to sacrifice breaking maybe a couple of fingers.
I hope people are hearing you. Like, be willing to break a couple of fingers if you want the gold medal hanging around your neck.
It's true. In terms of the luxury and the misfortune to know a lot of athletes, so I see behind the scenes.
Right.
So you reminisce and kind of go, well, 4 years ago I was here. 8 years ago I was here. Well, this feels like crap.
Yeah.
I'm on the outside and I've got no. I can't change But I think what I reminded myself with when it came to the Paralympics in Rio, because that's how I was feeling for the Olympics. It's like, well, the sacrifice that they've done for 4 years. You want the icing on the cake,
right?
You don't want the cake.
That's right.
You don't make the cake,
right?
You can't have your cake and eat it, James. It's like, how hard those men and women have worked to get there. Thus, you can't have the 15 minutes of fame,
right?
It doesn't work like that.
Well, you're bringing up the number 3 thing on my list. One of the reasons why I absolutely love the Olympics is because when you go to the Olympics, you're carrying the hopes of your country with you, right? Like, everybody's like, that's our guy, and I want to see our guy win. And you've devoted 4 years of your life to this thing, but your whole country's behind you.
I can be honest with you, Jeff. I never did that because that's too much pressure.
No, I mean, that everybody back in home country is sitting there cheering you on, though, and that's a beautiful thing.
A lot of That's a lot of pressure, isn't it? We're talking about the GB is only 70 million people. I can't think of what the population of the US is.
It's a lot more than 17 million.
If you went into that mindset of everybody back home was watching you, and you didn't know how to deal with that,
that could be debilitating.
You're going to crumble in the high pressure environment because it's tough.
Yeah.
If I happen back to Beijing's probably a lot of memories. Yes, it's competing there. The cube itself has a lot of memories because of my days. I didn't obviously compete as a swimmer there. We had to do a visualization exercise as development athletes before the structure was built. So this is about 2003, 2004. Yeah. I couldn't do it because you're telling me to do. I don't know why, because it's not that difficult task to do. But as I've been 17. Was being a little bit rebellious. I'm not going to do. I fell asleep instead. You had to do this with meditation and visualization. You had to relax, or you go out completely. But what I couldn't grasp on the concept is because it was an artistic impression. It was like a 2D image. It's like, it's not a real structure. How can I visualize a picture? Because I've got nothing to go. Nowadays, the person is I've seen 3D images of buildings. It's cool. It's like, well, I can feel myself walking through this building. So I've got that history alongside it of, okay, I had the luxury of actually going into the building when it's completed. Yeah. I got to I bumped into actually one of the French guys I used to compete against when I was a swimmer. Years ago, and he's like, "Oh, what event you competing?" No. So in French, I was like, "No, I'm competing in another sport. I finished. I'm coming to spectate." So it was quite surreal, because it's like, well, I was competing against you 2-3 years ago, and now I'm gonna watch the event, and when I was watching it on the TV the other night, it's like, well, trying to visualize how much the swimming pool has changed to make it a curling event venue. I think they've raised the floor a bit, because I think the seating was a lot bigger than that from my recollection. But it brings up memory. I've got videos of being in the pool.
Well, you're telling me number 2 on my list now. I am totally into curling, and I never thought I would be, but I'm watching these guys and gals go down the ice with absolute precision. But I can't help but think, hey, the guy or the gal that gets paid to sweep the ice, I wonder what it would cost to me to get them to come to my house and sweep up the dog hair at my house, because I got a mess in the house right now. And number 1 on my list, man, I'll just be really quick with this one. What I love most about the Olympics is those stories that they tell about the athletes before the event, because what they're telling is somebody who has devoted themselves, literally their entire life has been devoted to one thing. And it's fascinating just to watch some of those stories. You competed not just one, but in 2 Paralympic Games. So you were in London in 12, kind of in your home territory, in your backyard, but you didn't row in London in the 2012 Paralympics. Tell everybody what event you competed in the 2012.
I competed in sitting volleyball.
Yeah. Why transition from rowing to volleyball? What was the reason and the thought behind that?
With the transition, that one, it was a classification change. So I knew, the program knew it was happening after the games in Beijing, that they were going to streamline it. I probably shouldn't use that word. So they weren't going to implement it till the 2009 season. So I had one more year. So my boat coach at the time became the head coach of the program. So he's like, well, James, will you come back for 1 year, one more year and ride out on the white horse?
I'm getting this image of James riding out on the white horse right now. Keep going.
Do I get to go out on my terms? Obviously it didn't happen. But in terms of all the stuff, the political stuff that happened with the 3 years prior, is like, well, everybody I put in front of you, I can rest assured, if you beat everybody that's in front of you, it's a done deal. He kept to his word. So I probably, I was willing to probably go for a brick wall for him, because like, well, you're a very honorable person and you stuck to your word. I beat everybody as agreed, and obviously I was selected. They did run the person that beat me in 2008 versus the classification below. The classification guys below beat him. So I guess he took the decision to kind of go, well, it'd be a pointless exercise to make James go against it, because I'd have gone, I'd been mediocre and I just would have won and it'd be pointless. I had to go against the clock. Clock's not your friend. Clock's not your friend.
That's right. The clock
so
is
I wanted
never
that thing
easy
done.
on you.
1,000 meters. I wanted that thing. I rode the fastest I ever did against the clock, and I nearly passed out at the end. So, but if I'd have gone against the other person and never gone that far, I just would have kept a lot in reserve, and I'm just honest with that. So the transition of 2009 to go into volleyball, obviously I had another discussion with the performance director again of, okay, what's your thoughts about going into another sport? It wasn't just sitting volleyball on the table. I had cycling, I had sitting volleyball and something else. I think it was shooting. I wasn't keen on doing shooting because to me it's boring. But the only reason I say that, Jeff, is because it's in the indoor. I wouldn't mind trying clay shooting. Because then that's quite useful. You could go out hunting. So obviously cycling I did try out. For whatever reason, we went in a different direction. So I've got pictures of me being in the velodrome as well.
All right.
Of trying it out. That was very, very, I'm going to say fun, because trying to balance a bike on one leg is an achievement. I managed to do it, and I've ridden a bike as a kid with stabilizers, but to focus on that front wheel and to get a bike, and nobody's holding on to me. I managed to do it for, I don't know, I think about a minute or so. And then people say, oh, you actually did it yourself. I was like, really? So it was an achievement. But obviously, we went down the route of volleyball. And I'm quite lucky the first season in for my club. I was this close. I know people can't see my hands from being on the second team,
close,
not the first team, because I didn't want it enough in practice. It was, this is the ugly head of the laissez-faire coming to bite me in the ass. I can't remember why originally I got then put up to the first team. And that first team, our club team, went up to the national finals in our first season. A lot of people didn't like that because like they've come out of nowhere. It's like, well, how many Paralympics do we have in the team in the end? 5 or 6, not all in volleyball, but one's gone on to be multiple gold medalist. His household name in this country. One of them is now the pathway development officer for Disability Sport Wales, been world champion. So a lot of pedigree in terms of like raw talent sport wise. It was a good team. And one of my teammates, well, unfortunately, it's his funeral next week. So he's died at 31, but he made the team before I did. I was like, well, if he can make it, what can't I? And within a space of, it was about 6 months, I was in another national program. So when the opportunity to go full time, I moved to London, came up in the 2010s, I took it. Because it's like I finished university that summer. Stuff is stopping me. I've got no kids. I've got no girlfriend, no partner. I've got no school that I've got deadlines to adhere to. Let's do it. Let's give it 1 year. Give it a good crack. See what happens. I'd taken a gap year from my postgraduate study because I went to them and said, well, I'll come to your institution, but I want to have this year to see what happens, and then I'll come back and do the year of postgraduate study. That was a big mistake on my part, in hindsight, academically, because that year out didn't help, and changing institutions was more difficult. And living in London and being 200 miles away was hard. I ended up doing it once or twice, coming back home, going to school, 24 hours later, jumping back on the train and going back down.
Oh, that's rough.
I was like, I can't do this. So eventually we came to an agreement that, okay, I'll forego the rest of the study and come out with a postgraduate certificate, which other than teaching is not really well known, because it's like, well, how do I describe that? So I've always in the past said I've got an MSc and I haven't. That's because it's like, well, I haven't completed it. I've started one, but I still did postgraduate study, and the university is very proud of me to have made London. But I did what was probably best for me sporting. Academically, I needed to make that decision. If I'd have been a bit closer to maybe university in London, it'd be a lot easier to be able to balance. I wasn't a great asker of help. I'm very stubborn in terms of I probably could have asked for a little bit more dispensation with the course. Well, can I have maybe a little bit more clarity on the work that you want me to produce? Can I have a little bit more clarity on an expansion of the teaching? I wasn't willing to do that. I was willing to do like I'd done throughout all education, of kind of finding my way and faking it till I make, and it didn't work. So when we came to that amicable decision to part ways, in a sense, to, okay, I do these things, about 2-3 pieces of coursework, submit them, and then I get obviously that award that is it is alongside my undergraduate degree, and I probably honor them in the same valor in terms of they took hard work.
Yeah.
I think my postgrad probably took a little bit more, and then obviously focused 100% back into sport.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, we're gonna train. I think physically volleyball was a lot more demanding on the body than rowing was, even though rowing I'd spent more hours actually training. But to finally get the call up for that was more of a relief. I got an injury two months out from the games, and it was quite a bad one. I couldn't shake it, and I was like, oh, God, it's going to derail me from going to a games. Obviously managed to sort it out. Eventually one of the physios said, well, you need to stop going back too soon, because I'd feel all right, go back, re-aggravate it, feel all right, go back. So I kept knocking myself back. So like 1 step forward, 2 steps back. And it's like, well, I need to take more rest. And I did that. And then eventually I was back to training. We had our debrief after the London Games, and the head coach said to me, I'll pick my team a year out. So you could have told me that.
Yeah.
I know why you didn't, because you want people to go 100% all the way until pretty much the day before the games, just to keep people on their toes. The starting 6 knew they probably were going. I was on the fringe, but that would have given me a sense of belief as, well, I'm going, let me get myself sorted so I can go back to practice sooner and help the team. So I was, when he said that to me, I was probably livid. Inside, I was really angry. It's like, if you pick your team in 2011, you could have dangled the carrot a little bit. And this is, it's not knocking his man management, but you could have managed the situation maybe a little bit better. It's like, well, you're going to get picked, James, but you need to be a little bit more consistent. Because that year, I trained for one competition more than everybody else. I think I played 1 point over a series of 5 games.
Yeah.
My mom came to watch. I went from, the building could have caught on fire. I was that angry.
Yeah.
To I was in tears because I was an emotional wreck, because I'd given pretty much everything to practice that. I probably couldn't tell you what was right or wrong. I was just gone. I was goosed. It was, I think even our strength and conditioning coach said to the coaches, like, we can't, the guys who are full-time are training almost 20 hours a week, and the extra stuff was for the other guys to come in who were working to get additional so I missed 1 practice that week, so I ended up doing almost like 35 hours, so pretty much double the normal. And then to not play, I just exploded. And somehow the coach found out. I don't know how, because I was looking everywhere, doing like the very male thing to do before I have an outburst emotionally. That means
it's somebody else's fault, right?
Maybe not necessarily that, Jeff, but to see if there's anybody that can judge me. Before I see outpour to somebody that obviously cares about me regardless. Let me see that there's nobody around that can see it.
Right.
And then I obviously broke down in tears, and my mum let me know the next day. The coach went to apologize to her, but not to me.
Well, James, you're no stranger.
I found out about it because he said, "Oh, James is the problem with James is he's not consistent. He's got inconsistency." Hey, that's easy fix. James. So that's all I went back to from that day onwards. Hey, just got to get more consistent. Right. Just be technically Joe Average. Just do everything the same all the time, and you'll get picked. But if you'd apologize to me, not necessarily apologize, but say, this is why you're not playing. Hey, it's nothing I can do about it. Those are facts. If I'm not able to bring to the table what you need, hey, I need to fix that.
Yeah. James, you're no stranger to hard work, and you've overcome a lot of difficulties, and now you're helping others. You're a trainer. You got a podcast. And I want to wrap up with this. Like, how do you help those people that maybe at times were like you, that are struggling with a little bit of self-doubt? They think that they're not sure they got what it takes. How do you help them now as a trainer get over that self-doubt? And I'm actually asking this for everybody who's listening to this, because they hit those hard patches in life and they're like, I don't know if I have what it takes to make it through this. So what would you say to them?
Well, it's trying to reassure them to a certain extent that it's going to be okay. Obviously, I've got to take a very personal approach and take every case and look at it case by case and look at how you've got to where you're at in the first place. Because the goal and the result of everybody say they want to lose 30 pounds is the same, but how you got to the position of being 30 pounds overweight is going to be completely different. It could be you've got money issues of it could be you don't think you can do it. It could be you've had so much failure in the past. Why isn't this time going to be any different? So it's trying to chip away at all those setbacks and kind of go, well, I don't want you to fail. I'm not going to let you fail. But it's making them believe in terms of, yes, I'm the vehicle for change, but they've got to believe in terms they're capable of doing it. So by the end of, say, one of my consultations, if I haven't done that well enough, you're not gonna work with me. You're not gonna work with any coach, regardless of because you've got to be emotionally invested in your result, because that's generally where people, maybe men more specifically, come unstuck because they get too logical about it's going to cost me X amount of money.
And James, if people want to know more about you, if they want to find out more about your coaching business or your podcast, where do they go to find out more?
You can find more about my coaching business at jamesowenroberts.com. And you can find my podcast, The Mindset Athlete, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or anywhere that you listen to podcasts.
We're going to put the links to that in the notes to this show, but say the name of your podcast one more time for everybody who wants to subscribe.
The Mindset Athlete.
There you go. The Mindset Athlete podcast. Check it out. James, I really have been looking forward to this. Thanks for squeezing me into your schedule at the last minute. I have the greatest respect for Olympic and Paralympic athletes, and man, it's been exciting to be with you today.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks again for having me on, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks, buddy. Let's see you around. One of the things that I love about this episode with James Roberts is that he mentioned more than once these challenges that he faced in life. And at the time, they really felt difficult, but looking back on it now, he realizes those were opportunities to get stronger and to train harder. I'm telling you this because if you're going to be unbeatable, you are going to face challenges. And instead of letting them overwhelm you, why don't you take James's approach and look at them now as an opportunity to train harder and to get better for the future? Guys, thank you so much for joining me. Hey, if you just found our podcast for the first time, I'd love for you to follow us on social media at Unbeatable Podcast. Or if you've been listening and you like what you're hearing, why don't you subscribe to us on your favorite podcast platform and rate it and tell everybody what you think about this episode of Unbeatable. And by the way, I've got a free tool for you. It's a resource to help you get over some of those challenges in life. I call it the Survival Guide. And if you want it, all you've got to do is go to unbeatablearmy.com. It's free for you to download the Unbeatable Army Survival Guide. Thanks for joining us this week. I hope you're having a great time like me watching the Winter Games. See you next week.